What if the thing blocking your blessing isn't the devil, other people, or bad luck, but the habits you refuse to let go of? You can't pray for healing and keep feeding the habits that are breaking you. Hey loves, welcome back to my podcast. If you're new here, this is a space where we heal through the Word of God, grow in our faith, and learn how to truly walk with God so we don't keep going back to the things that broke us in the first place. In today's episode, this one might step on some toes a little bit, but I think this is something we all need to hear sometimes, including myself, because a lot of us are praying for blessings right now. We're praying for healing, for restoration, for peace, for a breakthrough. Some of us are asking God for clarity, open doors, financial stability, healthy relationships, purpose, and joy again. We're asking God to change our lives, but at the same time, we may still have habits, mindsets, or patterns that are keeping us stuck in the same cycles. And sometimes we misunderstand God. We start feeling like He's withholding from us, like He forgot about us, like everyone else is getting blessed except us. But the truth is, God is not trying to withhold good things from you. He's trying to align you, because blessings without alignment can actually destroy people. And what God wants us is not just to bless your life temporarily, He wants to transform your life completely. And here we are wanting God to elevate us while still holding on to the same habits that drained us, distracted us, or disconnected us from Him in the first place. And I had learned this the hard way. There were seasons of my life where I kept asking God to change my situations, but I wasn't changing my habits. I was praying for peace while feeding my anxiety. I was praying for healing while still entertaining people who hurt me. I was praying for a purpose while constantly distracting myself rather than spending time with God. And maybe you can relate to that too. Maybe you've been feeling spiritually stuck lately. Maybe you feel distant from God. Maybe you feel frustrated because you're praying and praying, but nothing seems to be changing. And sometimes the breakthrough isn't being blocked by God. Sometimes it's being blocked by the things we refuse to confront. This is not me saying you have to be perfect for God to love you, because none of us is perfect. We all fall short, we all struggle, but growth requires honesty. Healing requires honesty. Freedom requires honesty. You cannot heal what you keep pretending isn't hurting you. So today we're going to talk about 5 habits that may be blocking your blessings, blocking your peace, blocking your growth, and keeping you spiritually stuck. And more importantly, I'm going to talk about how to actually fix them in a realistic way. And before we start, I really want you to listen to this episode with an open heart. Don't listen thinking about somebody else. Don't think, oh, this is for my ex or this is for my friend. No, ask God, Lord, show me what needs to change in my life. Because sometimes the hardest person to confront is ourselves. And some of these habits can look small at first. They can feel normal because we've carried them for so long. But little habits create big outcomes. The small compromises, the constant distraction, the delayed obedience, the people we keep entertaining, the bitterness we refuse to release, all of that slowly affects our spiritual life more than we realize. And one thing I've learned in my own walk with God is God cares just as much about who you're becoming as where you're going. We focus so much on the blessing, but God focuses on the character. We focus on the destination, but God focuses on the transformation. Because imagine if God gave you everything you prayed for right now, would your current habits be able to sustain it? I mean, would your mindset be healthy enough to protect it? Would your spiritual life be strong enough to handle it? That's why God works on us before He works on our situation. The beautiful thing about God is that He doesn't expose us to embarrass us. He reveals things so He can heal them. And I believe some of you listening right now are in a season where God is trying to pull you higher. He's trying to mature you spiritually. He's trying to free you from cycles that have followed you for years. But in order to step into the new things He asks for you, some habits have to go. So let's get into it. Here are 5 habits that might be blocking your blessings and how to fix them. And the first habit that can block your blessings is disobedience. I think a lot of us hear the word disobedience and immediately think of something extreme or rebellious, but sometimes disobedience looks very subtle. Sometimes it looks like a delay. It looks like constantly making excuses. It can look like God telling you to move and you're just sitting there hoping He changes His mind. Deep down, you already know what God has been speaking to you about. Maybe He's been telling you to leave a relationship that's draining you. He's been telling you to forgive someone. Maybe he's been telling you to spend more time with him, to stop entertaining certain habits, to start that thing he placed on your heart, to speak up, to set boundaries, to trust him more, or even slow down and rest. But instead of obeying, we delay. We say things like, I'll do it later. I'm not ready yet. Oh, maybe next month. And sometimes it's not that we need more confirmation, we're just scared to obey it. And I get it, because obedience can be uncomfortable because it usually requires trust. God will often ask you to take a step before you see the full picture. And that's hard for us because we want details, right? And we want guarantees. We want God to show us the entire staircase before we take the first step. But faith doesn't work like that. Faith says, God, I don't fully understand this, but I trust you enough to move anyway. And that's why James 1:22 says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. And that verse convicts me too, because you can listen to sermons every week, read devotionals every day, post Bible verses online, and still not actually obey God. Hearing God is one thing, moving when he speaks is another. And some of us are spiritually exhausted because we keep wrestling with instructions God already gave us. We keep asking God for clarity while ignoring the last thing he told us to do, and delayed obedience is still disobedience. I remember there were seasons in my life where I knew God was telling me to let go of certain people over and over again, certain habits, certain environments, and I stayed anyway for a long time. And I literally prolonged my own suffering, not because I didn't hear him, but because obedience felt painful. I was afraid of what I would lose, afraid of change, afraid of being alone, afraid of uncertainty. But eventually I realized that every time I ignored God's direction, I delayed my own peace. Because God sees what we don't see. He sees the outcome before we do. And obedience is not punishment, it's protection. Sometimes God asks you to walk away because he's trying to save you from something you can't see yet. He closes doors because he knows where that road leads. But we fight him because we're emotionally attached to things he's trying to free us from. God is not asking you to be perfect. He's asking for surrender. He's asking for willingness. Blessings don't follow perfection because none of us is perfect. Blessings follow obedience. Even small acts of obedience matter. One prayer, one boundary, one honest conversation, one step of faith, one decision to finally listen to God instead of your emotions. One yes to God can open doors you never imagined. One step of faith can break cycles that have followed your family for generation. So ask yourself today, what is something God has been telling me to do but keep avoiding? What conversations have I been delaying? What habit have I been excusing? What step of faith have I been afraid to take? Because your next level may be connected to your next act of obedience. So how do you fix this? And sometimes we delay obedience because we make it bigger in our head than it actually is. We think obeying God means having everything figured out, being spiritually mature overnight, never struggling again, or making some huge dramatic change immediately. But often obedience starts with very small decisions, simple decisions, quiet decisions that nobody else can see. Maybe your act of obedience today is finally opening your Bible again after avoiding God for months. Maybe it's apologizing to someone. Maybe it's deleting a number you know is pulling you away from peace. Maybe it's getting honest about an addiction, setting a boundary, signing up for therapy, praying again, going to church again, forgiving someone, or finally stepping into the thing God has been placing on your heart for years. And it can feel uncomfortable at first because it stretches you, but growth always stretches you. Think about it. Every season where God grows us requires us to leave something familiar. And that's scary because even unhealthy things can become comfortable, but you can't keep asking God for a new season while clinging to old behaviors. At some point, your faith has to move. And sometimes the reason we stay stuck is that we keep waiting to feel ready. But if you wait until you feel completely ready, you may never move. Fear always tries to talk you out of obedience. Your emotions will always give you reasons to stay comfortable, but faith says, I'm scared, but I trust God more than my fear. And biggest lies people believe is that small acts of obedience don't matter. But throughout the Bible, God moved through simple acts of obedience. Noah built the ark before he saw the rain. Peter stepped out onto the water before he knew he could walk on it. The woman with the issue of blood reached for Jesus before she saw healing. Their miracle was connected to movement. And maybe that's the word for someone listening today. Move. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, not with every answer, but just move. because your next level may be connected to your next yes to God. And I really want you to take this moment and ask yourself, what is the one thing God has been telling you to do that you keep avoiding? What conversation, what change, what step, and what surrender? And then this week, do it. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's emotional, even if it's scary, because obedience opens doors that fear keeps locked. The second habit that can block your blessings is holding on to what God already told you to release. And sometimes it's not just a habit you need to let go of. Sometimes it's a person, a relationship, an environment, a version of yourself, a season of your life that you've become emotionally attached to, even though deep down you know God has been trying to move you forward. And the hardest part is sometimes we already know. Most times, actually, we know. We already feel it in our spirit. We already know that certain relationships are draining us, certain environments are pulling us away from God, certain conversations leave us anxious, certain habits leave us empty, and certain people are no longer healthy for our growth, but we keep holding on to because letting go feels painful. And what makes it difficult is that we confuse attachment with assignment. Just because you love someone does not always mean they are assigned to go where God is taking you. Some people are only meant for a season. Some environments were only temporary. Some versions of your life were necessary for your growth at the time, but they cannot come with you into your next season. And sometimes God starts disrupting things in your life, not because He's punishing you, but because He's protecting your future. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." And I love that verse. God is basically saying, stop staring at what I'm trying to move you out of. Stop living emotionally trapped in old seasons. Stop replaying old wounds, old relationships, old identities, old mistakes. Because while you're grieving the old, God is trying to introduce something new. You cannot receive new things from God while gripping old things with both hands. And some of us are emotionally exhausted because we're trying to force ourselves to hold on to things God has already removed His hands from. Relationships that constantly break us, friendships that keep leading us to compromise, old identities tied to pain, trauma, or survival mode. And we say because it's familiar, even pain can become familiar. And sometimes we don't let go because we're afraid of what happens after. And one thing I've learned in my life is this. Every time I held on to something God told me to release, it delayed my healing. It delayed my peace. And sometimes I wasn't even holding on to the actual person anymore. I was holding on to the idea of who I hoped they would become. I was holding on to memories, potential, something familiar, comfort. But God was trying to show me that my future could not grow while my heart stayed chained to the past. And maybe you listening right now are in that exact place. God is trying to move you forward, but emotionally you keep revisiting old doors, old conversation, old wounds, old attachments. And God is lovingly saying you cannot heal in the place that keeps reopening your wounds. Letting go does not always mean you stop loving someone. Sometimes it simply means you love God enough to obey Him. Release is an act of trust. Trusting that God sees what you don't. Trusting that if He removes something, He has a reason. Trusting that obedience will eventually bring peace, even if it brings grief first. And some people are praying for peace while continuing to hold on to the very thing stealing it from them. What are you holding on to that God already told you to release? Is it a relationship, bitterness, toxic cycle, a version of yourself tied to the past? Is it guilt, shame, fear, control? And maybe your breakthrough begins when you finally let go. So how do you fix this? First, you have to be honest with yourself. I mean, really honest with yourself. We need to stop making excuses for things we already know are hurting us. I mean, sitting with God and asking, Lord, what am I holding on to that you already told me to release? Because most of the times we already know the answer. We just keep trying to negotiate with God about it. And one of the hardest things about release is that we want closure, certainty, or guarantees before we let go. We want revenge sometimes. We want to know what's coming next. We want reassurance that something better is ahead, but faith doesn't always get all the details up front. Sometimes God simply says, trust me enough to let go. And I know it's easier said than done when we say, just let go. Because release usually happens in steps. It's not always one dramatic moment. Sometimes healing begins with small boundaries, small acts of separation. Maybe for you, it starts with creating distance from someone who keeps pulling you away from peace. Maybe it means unfollowing certain things that trigger unhealthy emotions in you. Maybe it means stopping conversations that constantly leave you anxious. Maybe it means no longer giving people unlimited access to your heart when they continuously mishandle it. And can we normalize boundaries for a second? Boundaries are not hate. Boundaries are wisdom. Jesus loved people deeply, but he also walked away from places and people when necessary. Not everyone gets unlimited access to you just because you love them. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is step back. Because if every time you reconnect with someone, you lose your peace, your discipline, your closeness with God, your emotional stability, or your healing progress, you have to ask yourself if that connection is helping your growth or hurting you. And I know cutting certain things off can feel painful, especially when there's history, memories, and love are attached to it. But just because something is familiar does not mean it's healthy. And we hold on to things simply because they've become part of our identity. Like we don't know who we are without them, but God cannot show you who you're becoming if you're clinging to who you used to be. And some of the strongest people are not the ones who can hold on to the longest. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones willing to finally let go. It takes courage to walk away from what's comfortable, to stop revisiting places God already pulled you out of, to choose healing over attachment. And it takes courage to trust that God can fill the empty spaces that release creates. And I really believe some people listening right now are one act of release away from the peace they've been praying for, one boundary away from emotional healing, one decision away from clarity, one surrender away from freedom. And I know letting go can feel like losing something, but letting go is actually how God gives your life back. The third habit that can block your blessings is secret sin. This is the part nobody really likes to talk about because it's easy to deal with the sins everybody can see, but it's much harder to confront things that happen privately. The habits nobody knows about, the secrets, the thoughts nobody hears, the compromises we quietly justify to ourselves. Secret sin is dangerous because it only starts small. It starts with something we minimize, something we excuse, something we say something like, well, it's not that bad, or everybody struggles with something, or at least I'm not doing what other people are doing. But over time, small compromises slowly create distance between God and us. One of the scariest things about sin is that it can become normal to us if we sit in it too long. We stop noticing how much it's affecting our mind, our peace, and our spiritual life and our relationship with God. We learn how to hide it from people, but deep down, we know it's there. And secret sin isn't even just about obvious things people think about. Sometimes it's bitterness nobody sees, jealousy no one hears, pride, lust, gossip, unforgiveness, addiction, constant lying, manipulation, entertaining unhealthy conversation, feeding toxic thoughts, secret resentment, whatever it is. If it's something God has been convicting you about and you keep feeding it privately, it will eventually affect your spiritual closeness with Him. Not because God stops loving you, not because He's rejecting you, but because sin creates separation. Sin clouds over spiritual vision. It affects our sensitivity to God. It makes us feel distant, numb, spiritually dry, and disconnected. And listen, the enemy loves secret sin because secrecy keeps people trapped. The longer things stay hidden, the stronger shame becomes. And shame will convince you that you're too dirty, you're too broken, you're too fake, or too far gone for God to still want you. But that is a lie. God already knows every struggle you have. Nothing about your weakness surprises Him. The problem is not struggling. The problem is refusing to surrender the struggle. Many of us try to manage sin rather than truly confront it. We want just enough God to feel comforted, but not enough surrender to truly change. Secret sin doesn't just affect you spiritually, it affects your peace too. Because when you constantly live in compromise, there's always internal conflict. You start feeling convicted, but continue doing the same thing anyway. And eventually you feel stuck between conviction and compromise. You love God, but you're battling habits that keep pulling you away from Him. God is not asking you to come to Him perfect. He's asking you to come to Him honestly. Because freedom begins with honesty. Healing begins with honesty. Deliverance begins with honesty. And some of the strongest prayers you can pray are not the perfect religious prayers. Sometimes the strongest prayer is simply, God, I'm struggling. God, I need help. God, I don't want to keep living like this. because the moment you stop hiding is often the moment healing truly begins. So, how do you fix this? First, you need to understand that you do not heal through shame. And I think that's important because so many people think beating themselves up will somehow make them spiritually stronger. But shame actually pushes people further from God. Shame makes people hide. Shame makes people pretend. Shame keeps people trapped in silence. Conviction draws you back to God. Shame makes you run from Him. And the beautiful thing about God is that even when He convicts us, His goal is restoration, not destruction. He's not exposing your weakness to humiliate you. He's revealing it because He wants to heal it. So the first step is confession. So when you finally stop hiding, healing can finally begin. In 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us. That verse reminds us that God already knew our struggle before we confessed it. Confession is not informing God of something He didn't know. It's surrendering rather than hiding it. So know that God is not shocked by your struggle. He's not smiling there, disgusted by you because you're battling something difficult. He already knows every weakness, every temptation, every private battle. And yet He still calls you close. He still loves you. He still wants a relationship with you. Again, freedom requires honesty. And after confession comes surrender, which means you stop making excuses for the sin and start taking responsibility for your healing. Because a lot of people pray for freedom while continuing to have access to the very thing destroying them. And this is where practical steps matter, because sometimes spiritual growth looks practical. Okay, so if social media keeps triggering lust, insecurity, jealousy, or unhealthy thoughts, maybe you need boundaries from there. If a certain person keeps pulling you back into compromise, maybe you need distance. If certain conversations, music, environments, habits, or late night routines constantly lead you into temptation, maybe something has to change, because you cannot keep feeding what you're asking God to free you from. You can't pray for healing while continuously reopening the wound. You can't pray for peace while entertaining chaos daily. And I know surrender is hard because sometimes sin temporarily comforts us. Sometimes it distracts us from pain, loneliness, stress, insecurity, or emptiness, but temporary comfort often creates long-term bondage. And one thing I've learned is this: whatever you constantly feed grows stronger. So if you keep feeding your flesh while starving your spiritual strength eventually weakens. But when you start feeding your relationship with God consistently, your spirit becomes stronger than the habits trying to control you. And freedom usually happens daily. It's not always instant. Sometimes healing is a process of continuously choosing God over your flesh again and again and again. Some days will feel strong, some days will feel hard, but every time you choose honesty over hiding, surrender over excuses, and obedience over compromise, you are moving closer to freedom. So if you're struggling right now, I just want you to know this: don't hide from God. Run to Him, because God is not waiting for you to become perfect before He helps you. He's waiting for you to finally be honest enough to let Him in. The fourth habit that can block your blessings is comparison. This is one of the biggest struggles in today's world because we live in a time where we constantly see everyone else's lives all day long. We scroll through social media and see engagements, marriages, babies, businesses growing, people traveling, and people buying houses, people getting opportunities, people looking happy, successful, healed, glowing, etc. And before we even realize it, comparison quietly starts creeping into our hearts. And it usually starts small. At first, it's just curiosity, but then the thoughts start: why is her life working out like that? Why does it seem so easy for them? Why am I still waiting? Why am I not there yet? God, when is it my turn? And slowly the comparison starts to run into insecurity, jealousy, frustration, dissatisfaction. You stop appreciating your own life because you become so focused on everybody else's timeline. Comparison is dangerous because it blinds you to what God is doing in your life. When you constantly focus on what someone else has, you stop noticing the prayers God already answered for you. You stop recognizing your own growth, your own healing, your own progress, your own blessings. And the hard part is social media makes comparison feel normal. But what people post online usually highlights only part of the story. You're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's best moment. You're comparing your waiting season to someone else's answered prayer without seeing the years of struggle, pain, sacrifice, rejection, or battles they went through in private. Sometimes we envy things we wouldn't even want if we knew the full cost. In Galatians 6:4, it says, each one should test their own actions without comparing themselves to someone else. And I love that because God never asks you to become somebody else. He created you with your own purpose, your own process, your own timing, your own assignment, and your own journey. God is not working on someone else's timeline for you. That's something people really need to understand. Just because someone else is getting married before you doesn't mean you're behind. Just because someone is more successful right now doesn't mean God forgot about you. Just because someone else's healing looks faster doesn't mean your story has less value. Comparisons create unnecessary pressure because they make you feel like you're late in life when God may still be preparing you. Sometimes we want blessings before we're emotionally, spiritually, or mentally ready to sustain them. But God sees the full pictures. He knows the timing that will protect you, grow you, and prepare you. And some people are rushing into relationship because they feel behind, right? And some people are forcing opportunities because they feel pressure. Some people are emotionally exhausted because they're constantly measuring their life against everybody else's. But peace comes when you stop competing with people God never asked you to compete with. And one of the biggest signs that comparison is affecting your heart is when somebody else's blessings start making you feel bitter instead of inspired. And if we're not careful, comparison can quietly make us resentful towards God. We start questioning His timing, His goodness, His plans for our life. But what's meant for you does not require you to envy someone else. Sometimes God intentionally gives us different timelines because He's developing different things in each of us. Some are in planting seasons, some are in pruning seasons, some are in waiting seasons, some are in the harvest season. But just because your season looks different doesn't mean God is absent from it. Delayed does not mean denied. Sometimes your waiting season is where your character is built. Sometimes your hidden season is where your roots grow deeper. Sometimes your slower season is actually God protecting you from things you're not ready for yet. So if you're struggling with comparison lately, I really want you to remember this. God sees you. God has not forgotten you, and your life is not behind schedule because your assignment is not obsessed over someone else's path. Your assignment is to stay faithful to yours. So how do you fix comparison? One of the first things you may need to do is limit what you consume. And I know that sounds simple, but it matters more than people realize because what constantly enters your eyes and mind eventually affects your heart. If every time you scroll, you leave feeling insecure, discouraged, bitter, anxious, or like your life isn't enough, that's affecting you spiritually and emotionally, whether you realize it or not. Sometimes we keep exposing to things that trigger comparison and then wonder why we feel dissatisfied with our own lives. But your mind was never meant to constantly absorb everybody else's highlight reel all day long. That's why protecting your eyes and protecting your mind is so important. Some people don't need more scrolling right now. They need more gratitude, more presence, more time with God because comparison grows louder as your relationship with God grows quieter. Some of the most important season of your life will happen away from attention, away from applause, away from recognition. And that's okay because your worth is not measured how your life compares to someone else's. And sometimes we forget that the things we overlook today were once prayers we cried out for. And another thing that helps is learning to genuinely celebrate other people without making their blessings mean something negative about your own life. Celebrate people too. Somebody else winning does not mean you're losing. God does not run out of blessings. He is not limited. Somebody else's testimony is not proof that He forgot about you. If anything, it should remind you that God is still moving, that God is good. So if comparison has been stealing your peace lately, maybe it's time to pause, step back, spend less time consuming other people's lives, and more time nurturing your own relationship with God. Because the more secure you become in God's plan for your life, the less pressure you'll feel trying to keep up with everybody else's timeline. And the fifth habit that can block your blessings is inconsistency with God. This one is probably the root of everything else we talked about today, because when you're disconnected from God consistently, it becomes much easier to fall back into old habits, old mindsets, and temptations, and old cycles. And I think a lot of people genuinely want to be close to God, but their relationship with Him only becomes active during emergencies. We run to Him when we're hurting, when we're anxious, when our relationships fall apart, when we feel lost, when life becomes painful, we need answers, and when we hit rock bottom. But once things calm down again, prayer disappears. The Bible stays closed. We stop seeking Him consistently. I'm not saying this with judgment because I think many of us have been there before, but relationships cannot grow without consistency. Imagine only talking to someone when you needed something from them. Like, how does that look? Or how does that feel? That relationship would never become deep, intimate, or strong. And sometimes that's exactly how our relationship with God becomes. We want God's presence without spending time with Him. We want spiritual strength without feeding our spirit. We want peace while neglecting the very relationship from which it comes from. Inconsistency is dangerous because it keeps people spiritually weak. When you only see God occasionally, your spiritual life becomes unstable. You feel close to Him one week, distant the next, motivated one day, spiritually drained the next, easily discouraged, easily distracted, easily pulled back into old patterns. The enemy does not always need to destroy someone completely. Sometimes all he needs to do is keep them spiritually inconsistent, because inconsistency slowly weakens discipline, it weakens discernment, it weakens spiritual strength. In Joshua 1:8 says, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night." And 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, "Pray without ceasing." Notice how both verses point to consistency, daily connection, ongoing relationship, not occasional moments with God, not only when life feels heavy. And sometimes people overcomplicate the relationship with God. They think they need to know everything about the Bible first, pray perfectly, speak a certain way, or become super spiritually mature overnight. But God is not asking for perfection. He's asking for consistency. He is asking for a relationship. Just think of any relationship. For example, your spouse. Are you just gonna text them once a week? Or just think of them once in a blue moon? No, you have to build your relationship and it has to be consistent. You have to get to know each other. Another example, you don't become physically healthy from going to the gym once. You become healthy through consistency. And your spiritual life works the same way. One prayer matters, one devotional matter, one moment with God matters. But real transformation happens when those moments become part of your lifestyle. And the truth is, whatever you spend the most time with will influence you the most. If you spend more time consuming social media, negativity, gossip, unhealthy relationship, fear, distraction, or chaos than you spending with God, eventually your mind and emotions will reflect that. But when you consistently spend time with God, something begins to change slowly. Your thinking changes, your reaction changes, your desires change, your discernment grows, your peace deepens, you become less attached to the things that once controlled you, because closeness with God starts transforming you from the inside out. And one thing I've learned in my own walk with God is this: the seasons when I stayed closest to Him were the seasons when I had the most peace internally. Not because life was perfect, but because I was connected to the source of peace daily. And maybe that's what God is inviting some of you into right now. Not just emergency prayers, not just occasional devotionals, but a daily relationship, a real walk with Him. Because closeness with God is not built in one emotional moment. It's built through daily consistency. So how do you fix inconsistency with God? I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is overcomplicating their relationship with God to the point that they end up doing nothing. They think they need to wake up 5 a.m. every day, pray for 2 hours, kneel down for 10, understand the entire Bible immediately, or become spiritually perfect overnight. And when they can't maintain that pressure, they quit completely and start feeling guilty. But God is not asking you to perform for Him. He's asking you to spend time with Him. And I really want you to understand this, because sometimes we make a relationship with God feel more religious than relational. But prayer is simply talking to Him. Spending time in the Word is simply getting to know Him more. It doesn't have to be complicated. So as we close today's episode, I want you to know that God is not blocking your blessing. He is not against you. He is not ignoring you. He is not withholding good things from you just to make you suffer. But sometimes the habits we hold on to, the patterns we keep feeding, the compromises we avoid confronting are the very things keeping us spiritually stuck. So if you take anything from today's episode, let it be this: Obey God even when it's uncomfortable. Let go of what He told you to release. Be honest about your struggles instead of hiding them. Stop comparing your life to everybody else's timeline, and stay consistent with God even when you don't feel emotional or motivated. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. And if this episode spoke to you, helped you, or convicted you in some way, share it with someone who may need it to. And as always, I'm so grateful you're here walking this journey with me. You're not stuck. You're being invited into a deeper walk with God. And I'm walking with you. I'll see you in the next episode, my loves. Love you.
Take a look at where you've been and how you've come so far. No matter where you find yourself, you're always where you are. Go anywhere you go, do anything you do, I'll be with you.